finally. All right, so this is the follow-up mastermind brain trust call that we've been doing with our Restoring Rural Business North Carolina series sponsored by LISC. We've been doing these as a follow-up to the webinar because we've gotten some really good questions during the webinars, but traditionally, of course, when they're live, you lose that contact, but we've been doing these as follow-ups. We had a really good question the other day, which our presenter will talk about in a second. And then I had a couple other follow-ups that got submitted, so we're going to talk about those. And if anybody joins us, we'll have time to answer some other questions. So, Stephen, you're back with us. And I was trying to remember the details of the question. I know you probably jotted it down because it was pretty good. What was the question?
Yeah, so someone asked specifically surrounding the demographics of the social networks for the platform.
That's right, yeah.
And so I actually pulled a link that I'm going to send to you, but, depending on what you're selling, the product and services you are, obviously goes back to the presentation and, we're really understanding your customer and where you should spend your time. But I have this link that articulates, the age, the income for each of them that I'll send around that you can definitely share. But, what we've seen in smaller towns is obviously the larger platforms such as Facebook and Instagram are really the go-to for that sense, and you'll see in this article it really highlights all those in a very in-depth, goes through gender, how much time people are spending, the income, the age, etc. for not only Facebook and Instagram but for other ones as well.
Great. Yeah, I know that's a tough question for most folks, especially when they're starting, where to put that time. And we talked a lot, and we'll get to my questions. That kind of relate to that for ones that you own, but for the ones who are brand spanking new, who are thinking, okay, where should I spend my time, and they're not quite sure, it is a little bit of guesswork, but to have some guidance like that would definitely help. But Facebook go ahead.
Yeah, just to add to that, and I'm sorry to cut you off, is I think that there's different phases that you're in the business too. So as in an example, when you're opening a business and you're really just trying to get the word out to as many people as possible, sometimes the strategy might be a little bit different than, honing in on who exactly your customer is and owning your customer, because, when you're opening a new business, you're really trying to gain awareness and exposure as much as possible. And then once you understand, once your business is open and you understand where the sales and revenue are coming from, that really allows you to get a little bit more tailored as you might be working with a limited budget or a small budget in general, and you want to make sure that your time and effort is spent wisely. Obviously, there's multiple strategies, but, there's also different approaches depending on what stage you are in your business too.
No, you bring a good point that it is important to kind of take a scattershot approach when you're first starting, just to get it out there. I do think, and we talked about this a little bit the other day, is that especially for smaller businesses who don't usually and oftentimes think of it initially in terms of having a good marketing plan and starting out, even if they do think of it, in many cases because they are either on their own or don't have a lot of employees or, like you mentioned, limited resources, they don't have that capability to commit to too much. So it may mean knowing what you can and can't do. But I think it gets back to one of the points you made the other day too, which was know where, as you start, especially in smaller rural areas of North Carolina, know kind of the best ways to plug in. There's usually, so like you mentioned, there's usually somebody who knows the best ways and to get up with them and make those connections.
Yeah, and I think it just goes back to the overarching strategy in the sense of smaller towns. A lot of people know, the same people or similar people, and in more rural areas, there's less places to hang out and less things for people to do. So if you integrate yourself in those places where people are hanging out and they are doing, and you start conversating about your business, you start talking about if someone else has a business, and then you start ideating and forming these relationships not only on a digital side of things but in person, and getting their information so that you can follow up, and it doesn't always have to be in an in-person meeting. So I think, and then, having conversations, building that up, and, if it's someone that really, people gravitate towards in that small town, is there a way to activate them on your side? And if that's, once a month they get a free meal for a restaurant or a free haircut for a salon, for them to push the word and be a brand ambassador for you, that's extremely vital. And it really, isn't costing you as much money as it would be if you're trying to shoot out social posts or emails to random people who aren't brand advocates or don't have someone in the community that they trust, like this guy or this girl.
Great. So let me get to, because I think it gets to a couple things, and I don't know which one's easier to deal with. I'll give you generally is a harder question I think we get all the time here. But you talked about how both Facebook and almost all the traditional platforms, in order to really gain traction nowadays, are the pay-to-play model, as we all know, is really the way to go to really get traction. And I guess the question really was getting at, they were asking, like, how would you know, or is there a good way? I mean, you could spend hours really talking about this one, but if you had to kind of give a good nugget of advice for somebody thinking about putting some money into advertising and promoting either on Facebook or Instagram or any of the major platforms where they're thinking about, what's your advice? Because that is obviously a crucial component now.
Yeah, my honest advice is there's a lot of good, if you're doing it on your own versus hiring someone. Obviously, there's different scenarios. So I'm just going to go with the expectation that you're trying to do it on your own.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're doing it on your own, don't just spend money to spend money because you feel like it's going to generate exposure and awareness. In that sense, do some research. We live in a day and age where you can access a tutorial on YouTube, an article that has a walkthrough on how to do it, and try to define that customer of yours to have an approach when you're doing the ad. Don't just boost a Facebook post or an Instagram post to get exposure, because it's not really going to do the most bang for your buck in that sense. And in my opinion, you might get more bang for your buck elsewhere if you're just spending $50 to promote a post or something along the lines. It also depends, and that's contingent on if you have a built-in fan base on social media, a couple thousand, or if you have a couple hundred, that will depict the strategy as well in that sense too. So I think it really just depends on that, but I would definitely recommend do not spend any money without doing a little bit of research online. And there's multiple tutorials on YouTube, on blog posts, etc., that you can kind of listen to get the basics to really help you. And then the other portion of this, the last portion I would say is don't do the same thing. Trial and error, and running various campaigns to test the success and the ROI. Don't get complacent and just spending, hey, I did $50 to boost this post. I did $50 to boost this post. Why am I not getting sales or people in my business? You have to have a strategy to it, and put some time and effort into it if you want results.
That's good advice. I tell folks that I work with that to not be afraid to experiment quite a bit, because it's not difficult on most of the platforms nowadays to do some pretty easy experiments, especially in rural areas where there's a huge advantage where you're not in a lot of competition. So it's a good opportunity. The last one got to a huge point that you kind of really hammered, and then I talked about it and really agree with, which is that email is still one of the best return on investments. But what would you recommend it was kind of a two-part, was if people were getting into the tools, and that's kind of some of the standard ones like MailChimp or Constant Contact, but then the other part was, what are the best ways to really get folks to get their emails, to really get them to, especially in an area where there may not be people who use email that much?
Yeah, I mean, I like to always approach problems such as this, and in a sense of, what makes me sign up for emails and what makes me give away my email, and trying to work backwards in that sense of, I gave away my email to potentially enter a contest. As an example, I gave my email when I was at a restaurant because they told me if I gave my email that day that I would get 10% off my bill. It depends on how much you value that guest data for your ongoing marketing purposes or ad use, et cetera, that you can create and cultivate different things in that regard. You could set up a booth at a farmer's market and have a spin the wheel that there are various prizes that range from a koozie to a free haircut to something that you got donated, a prize pack that you got donated from a local business. And you could do a business card drop where people are dropping their business cards in a bucket at the front of your business or at the counter of your business. I think there's a wide range, and if you any person, every person is giving out their email at some point in their life at this stage. And so I think just kind of any time that you come across that, noticing why are you giving out your email, what are they doing, is this something that I could apply to my business in that sense. But really, it's offering some sort of value in the simplest terms to them, because you gain value from having their email and their information to market to on an ongoing basis.
And you mentioned like one of the most old school ways that our grandparents used back in the day, which was just having the simple win a prize, win some sort of freebie for your business card drop, which in most cases is going to have all your information, not just an email, but would also have perhaps a location and perhaps also phone numbers and in this day and age, text and probably almost every other social media kind of thing for those that are that advanced. And now if you've got that and you're doing that in a smart way, if you've got a good database too, which I gets back to the email, but most of the email platforms nowadays can serve as that database. They have most of the information that would be useful for collecting all of that data, like you said.
Yeah, and you can on all the platform services, you can select, do I want phone, do I want zip code, do I want, what, and you have control of that and what's the requirement and what's not. But I think there's, not just on free stuff, but it's also if you're in an educational business, sign up to gain access to my 7-page checklist on how to execute whatever you're doing in your business that you can offer value in that sense. So I think educational purposes is a great way to garner that. I think access. So if you have access to something, not just free, but to gaining access to anything, if you're throwing events or anything along those lines, is definitely something. Various contests where you're not necessarily giving away stuff to your business, but maybe a friend of yours gave you concert tickets and you can't go, and you can leverage that to say, hey, I got 2 tickets I'm giving away, sign up to enter, in sense like that. Or someone gifted you a $250 Amazon gift card for Christmas that you don't need, and as a business owner, you can use that and leverage it to sign up, to get email sign-ups and stuff like that.
That's great. Well, I don't have any other questions. Let me see if we've got anybody on. It's all us today, so they made it easy, but there were some really good questions. And Steve had mentioned he's going to share a link. We'll be putting that up. And is there an email that you prefer? I mean, is there a service you prefer that's is good for?
Yeah, I highly recommend MailChimp. It's a free service up to 2,000 email addresses that you host on a monthly basis. So I highly recommend starting with something like that. Through MailChimp, they actually have awesome service to allow you to create landing pages, which is very simple to do as well. So if you need to create a simple landing page for a contest where you what we were talking about earlier, to sign up to win, you can create that directly on there, and those email contacts go directly into your email software, MailChimp, and your database that you can access, segment, et cetera. And through MailChimp, they actually have some templates that you can utilize for creating emails. which are drag and drop and becoming a lot more user-friendly in a sense of how you would use, as an example, a PowerPoint, and you enter clip art and you move it around, type thing. It's becoming a lot more user-friendly, and you don't know how to you don't have to know how to code necessarily. And so the bright side of that is it's making it easier for smaller businesses to execute without having to pay someone or learn the tech side of things.
I'm glad that's your recommendation, because that's generally mine. I know Constant Contact is a favorite for folks, but they only do a free trial, and then there's a bunch of others that do a lot of good free trials, but usually a trial is never long enough to build an email list of any stripe or to even try it out in a meaningful way, whereas MailChimp, like you suggest, I've always suggested, because it scales. So, I mean, if you start small and you find that it's working, eventually you'll end up paying for itself pretty much if you have to get into the paid platform of it. But versus a lot of the others that are pretty comparable and just as good, but in most cases don't give you that kind of flexibility to really try it out and scale it up. So I'm glad to hear that that's your recommendation, because again, they've also, like you mentioned too, added a lot to it, even at a free level, that makes it more robust than just an email system. So.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that is, as your business grows, or if you're a medium or small-sized business that has additional applications or softwares that your business utilizes, the other additional perk for MailChimp is they have a very, very robust integration platform with a multitude of services. You can have a wide range of things like Salesforce or anything along those lines if you use that, or if you use smaller CRM systems, et cetera, that can integrate directly into it, and so that the emails that you're getting are automatically shared into your email database.
No, you're exactly right. We sound like we're turning into a MailChimp commercial, but it's really good. It's the one I've used the longest. I use internally for us, and I recommend most often for clients. So glad to hear that that's your preference too. Well, if you've got no other questions, it's been great. We'll have these up. We'll share these links. Again, remind everybody to go to bit.ly, B-I-T, /RestoreWorld, NC. That's where you'll find the recording for Stephen's webinar the other day, and then we'll have this up, and we'll share the links that he shared with us today, so that you can gather all this information. And Stephen, appreciate your time and coming back to answer some questions. Like I said, we had good follow-up, so
thank you. Thank you guys as well for the opportunity, and I wish everyone the best in terms of their business and everything along those lines. And if there's anything else I could do to help you guys or anyone else, feel free to let me know.
Yeah, we'll have his information up too, and then you can go to the original stuff, and he also shared the slides from the other day, so if you want those, we can get those to you as well. Thanks, Stephen. Well, have a great Thursday. Enjoy the rest of your week.
You as well. Have a good one.
Thanks.